Alright, hello, my name is Jonah Howell, and this is my individual investigation into 3D modeling workflows. So I started with a sword, and I did a workflow, just kind of stuck to what I know for the first one, which is to make a low poly in Maya, make a high poly model in ZBrush, and then try some different methods of retopology just to kind of see what might work. Unwrap, do the UV unwrap in Maya, and then texture the model in Substance Painter. So for the sword, and pretty much for all the low poly modeling that I do, I pen into shape and then I make some edge loops and then move around the vertices to get the object to get to be the desired shape that I want. And then we'll do some offsets, some extrudes, some bevels as needed, maybe some bridges, do some bridges later with the shield. And so it's just kind of getting something to a rough shape and then just, making minute little adjustments just to get it to be the exact shape that you want. Select the faces here, do an offset, do an extrude to kind of give a little edge, and then bevel those edges there. Same thing with the guard, bring in a cube, make some cuts, do an extrude, just move around vertices. Same thing with the handle, the hilt. And so this is the version that we'll end up using in ZBrush to do the high poly. And then once we get into ZBrush, I end up creasing the model and subdividing it up. And then I use a mask to draw these patterns or these designs, and just kind of winging it. I don't have this design kind of pre-drawn or anything. And so draw out this with the mask, and then once this is done, I will invert the mask and use some deformation tools. I'll inflate and then use the inflate balloon. And then I use damn standard brush to just kind of give it that pinched look, that metallic-y metal look. And then once I go over the whole thing with the damn standard brush, I will do various different just trial and error things with the polish deformation tool just till it gets to a nice point, and then I will probably go over parts of it with the H polish brush that are just like a little too pillowy, a little too soft. Same thing with the guard, draw a design with the mask, and then inflate it negatively, and then do some hand sculpting designs as opposed to doing it all with the mask. Then going over with the H polish brush just to try to tighten it up, make it look more like metal. Pretty much repeat this process with the whole thing. Use trim dynamic on some parts just to make sure, or just to make the edge flow not so clean. Sculpt little patterns into inside the bigger pattern, and then get into substance. So none of the retopology methods that I tried really worked out, so I ended up using a 75K decimated model for the low poly version, bake the high poly on top, and then this is an auto unwrap from Substance, and I'm using poly groups to sort of just to ID the textures. And I will apply smart materials, and then I'll apply some smart masks, and then depending on if necessary, I'll typically go in and then do some hand painted stuff, some scrapes, rust, pitting, things like that. And then this is the final render for the sword, final renders. And so for the shield, I wanted to take a little bit of a different approach. I wanted to make two low poly versions, one that would be used for the UV, for the low poly version that would be used in Substance, and then one that would be smooth and then brought into Maya, or excuse me, brought into ZBrush to be used for the high poly version. And then have two high poly versions, one that would be baked and then one that would be decimated that I would use in Maya to address any topology issues, and then I also wanted to use Substance to make the ID map with using folders and adding black mask to the folders and kind of color coding, making the ID in Substance. So same deal, bring in shapes, make some cuts, move vertices around. For the centerpiece ended up changing a bit from the concept art. It just didn't look good in 3D. And then here we do some offsets, do some extrudes, place rivets, which are spheres cut in half. Then for the back portion, we have the handle. And that's the part that I bridged. And so for this method to work, I wanted to do the same masking workflow, but not do only use the inflate. Don't do the inflate balloon and then do the damn standard pass and all that stuff. So just to try to keep the changes more minimal, something that I felt like could be baked onto the low poly. See here where, yeah, I just inflate and then polish. And that did seem to work. It seemed to kind of fix that issue. Then we go in H polish pass, use the damn standard brush to carve in some scrapes, use the trim dynamic brush to get rid of some of those clean edges. And then I do actually unwrap this one myself in Maya. And this is what we use for the low poly. Unwrap this and then soften the edge. And then you can see where the topology issue is, or where the too many changes are from the high poly to the low poly. And so I bring the decimated version into Maya and line it up with the low poly and adjust it accordingly, so to fix those baking issues. And then set up the mask with the folders. And then texture as I did the sort. Just add smart materials, some smart masks, and then add some hand painted stuff to it as well. There are the final renders for the shield. And then so for the spear, I want to do pretty much the same workflow as the shield, with just the attempt to now, with ironing out the kinks and learning from my mistakes, to do that workflow much more efficiently. And it did work out. This model took, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 days less than the shield. So it definitely, I was definitely able to make it more efficient. The same deal, moving around vertices. Just try to make clean edges, extrudes, more cuts. Same masking technique. Draw the mask, inflate it, and then I sculpt little designs inside that. Sculpt some designs onto handle here. Then use trim dynamic to get rid of some of the clean edges. Then damn standard to add some scrapes and some pinning. UV unwrap the model in Maya. Now I did run into an issue with this where these edges here on the handle were still too hard, like the smooth version contrasted too much, which is what I'm doing here. So I'm going in to the low poly and actually smoothing the handle so I can get a better bake with the high poly. And then texturing, same deal. Smart material, smart mask, some hand painted stuff. Then there is the final renders for the spear. And then I had a bit of extra time because the spear didn't take nearly as long as I thought it would. So I decided I wanted to address the issues that I had with the spear, specifically this the tapering issue that I had. So I wanted the edges of that spear's guard to be tapered, and I didn't realize that it's kind of tougher to do in Maya. And then it dawned on me I knew how to do it with ZBrush. So I wanted to try that, do just a part in ZBrush and then bring it into Maya for the low poly. Because I've made characters with horns before, and this is how I would do it. Taper an edge, use bend curve, add some anchor points, and then move them around to just get a nice kind of curve to your shape, and then bring it into Maya. And so the issue I had here is that it just has way more faces than it needs. And so after kind of fighting with it for a while, using the cleanup option to remove all the duplicate vertices, and also using retopology option to get the model down. Yeah, here it is. I was able to, so now I can have one clean edge right down the center to make that sharp point. And then some extrudes. Try to get it to be the shape that we wanted. And then I was also able to use duplicate special, which is not something I really ever use. So that was a nice change of pace. And then similar thing here, bevel the edges so we can smooth it out and it doesn't lose the hard edges that we want it to have. Duplicate special. Scale some things down. More extrudes, more bevels. So that was pretty much the whole workflow for the maze. It was trying to address that issue of the tapering that I had with the spear. And there are the final renders for the maze. So in conclusion, I feel like I learned a very consistent workflow to be able to put out hard surface 3D models. With making sure you have the two different versions, the one for the unwrap and then the one that is smooth to be put into the ZBrush, and then making the high poly in ZBrush, and then having a decimated version, bringing that in the low poly into Substance to see any topology issues where red is on the cage, and then bring the decimated version into Maya, line it up, unwrap that version, bake the high poly onto in Substance, and then Texture seems to put out be a consistent workflow for making hard surface 3D models. And I was also able to discover just a lot of tools that I didn't utilize before, and also to use ZBrush and Maya kind of together, not just use one for low poly and one for high poly, to use them just as necessary. Thank you for watching.